Hello and welcome back. Today I wanted to show off one of the many amazing ways you can use resources in Godot. To show this off, I put together this fun little project that can kind of use some love. If I press play and I'll show you what we have, it's just a little bit of a, you've got a little player ship and you've got some asteroids spawning. Might sound familiar to some of the other things that I've done or shown off. But there's a lot of similar code that's kind of being reused and duplicated across these scenes that I kind of want to go through. So to show this off, we have a little manager here, which is just spawning some asteroids. We have our player. So this is our player ship. Quick thing, by the way, if you are lacking art assets and don't really feel like downloading any and just want to get something really quick together, you can use Polygon 2Ds to create a quick shape for your character or whatever object you need. This is a really useful tool. Make sure you use it. But yes, we have that, and then we have the asteroid, which is also the same thing. It is also just a Polygon 2D. I've got some visibility stuff to make sure it doesn't get, to make sure that they delete themselves when they go off screen and things like that, and some basic collision shapes. But the thing I actually really want to look through today is, more or less, I want to show off how I go about using composition and inheritance. Now, I've done this before where I've went and shown you how to make nodes that each contain their own scripts and things like that, but that's kind of level 1. There is a level 2 to this that is very, very useful. Now, I'm going to go to the script, and this is the player ship specifically. You can see here we have an acceleration, deceleration, max speed, and rotation speed, and then a current speed, right? And then we have the apply movement functionality, rotation, handle acceleration, and handle deceleration functionalities. Now, these are being used in the asteroid script as well, right? It's pretty much all the same stuff. Now, the big thing with this is, as I said in the past, what I would do is I would then make a node, I would attach these scripts to it, basically containing acceleration and deceleration. That way, anytime I want to make a new entity that uses some of this functionality, I can just put the nodes on and just be done with it. Now, there's a downside to this, and this is in much, much larger projects. Say you are making a real-time strategy game and you have 100 characters on screen at once and they all have 30 to 40 different components or extra nodes attached to them. The overhead of the nodes does start to actually build up quite a bit. So as a kind of early optimization, which is also not too bad of an idea in this case, there is another way of going about this. So let's go back to the player script. We'll start here. First thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to go into a new folder and create a new script. So I have a resources script set up for this, or a resources folder with components. As you can see here, I've already got one made, and I'll show that off in a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new script. And this is where it gets a bit weird. What I would usually do is make a node 2D or a node, right? What I'm actually going to do is turn this into a resource. It's going to have no template because I don't need to think about a template, and the script, I'm just going to call this the movement component, and I'm going to hit create. Now, this is where it gets a bit odd, right? Using resources to actually house code and things like that is not something I really talk about. I usually talk about holding data and things like this, but this is just that extra thing you can do. So let's open up the script and make sure we have it open and ready. Let's go and give our resource the class underscore name of movement component. And now let's go through some refactoring. The best thing in the world, the most favorite thing, refactoring. So what do we need for our movement component? Well, we're going to need the max speed, acceleration, deceleration, right? So let's cut those out of the player ship. Now let's go to our movement component and paste those into there. Now we're going to also be needing the current speed inside of our player ship here. Let's cut that out. And everything's going to start throwing errors, and that is a-okay. Kind of part of the course when you're doing refactoring. Now we're going to need to go and steal those two acceleration and deceleration functions, these ones. So I'm just going to Control X, I'm going to cut those out, and I'm going to shorten this script by quite a few lines already, which is really cool. We're going to go back to that movement component, paste those back in, and now there's going to be some issues, right? So this will run perfectly fine, and we can just use this, and we can return a, like the two ways we can do this. We can just do a return for a float, right? Because the current speed is a float, so I can just go return current speed if I really want to, and I can use that as a parameter, which is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is by passing through extra parameters through these functions here. So what is handle acceleration and deceleration going to need? Well, it's going to need access to velocity controls, right? It's going to need to be able to modify velocity for whatever entity that it is currently attached to. That way, this holds all of the movement code for anything that we want to do. So let's go and create a new variable here, or a new parameter here called entity, and we'll pass it through as type. Let's just do a character body 2D for now. Now, there is a downside to this, and I'll talk about that in 1 second. So let's just do entity dot velocity is equal to the entity dot transform dot x, because that's how I'm picking my direction, and then I'm going to go times current speed. So let's just go back to the player ship real quick. As you can see here, velocity is equal to transform.x times current speed. But let's go back to this real quick. Why could this be a problem? Well, if we make it so this is only able to return, or only able to be functioning on a character body 2D, what happens if we want to apply this to either rigid bodies, or, I don't know, say we want to have sprites that move? That is a downside to basically hard linking it with this parameter. So instead, as I said, what we could do here is we could just set this up as a floating return type, remove the parameter, and just return the current speed. And then when we actually go to use this, instead of doing velocity equals transform.x times current speed, we do velocity equals transform.x times the handle acceleration. Now, there's a lot of reasons why we should and shouldn't do these things. Now that I've kind of shown that off, I'm going to more or less just redo this. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing for handle deceleration, because I know in this project that the only thing that's going to be moving are character body 2Ds. So let's do this. Entity dot velocity is equal to the transform dot, not transform 2D, entity dot transform dot x times the current speed. And finally, for the deceleration, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Entity dot velocity, not that. I am very, very good at spelling today. Is equal to the entity dot transform. I could just copy paste this line up, I think about it, but hey, we're already here, so let's just do this. But that is it, right? That's our movement component done. Now, how do we actually put this to use, right? Because we can't just pull this over and drop it in as a node now that it's a resource. Well, this is where the fun begins, right? What we can do here is we can, since the movement component is editable, or it's a resource that we would like to be able to edit, right? Because we have exported variables, is we can just export a export var a movement underscore component of type movement component. We could set that equal to null, or we could set it equal to movement component dot new, depending on how you kind of want to go about this. For now, I'm just going to set this equal to null. I'm going to hit Control S and save. And now I need to figure out the acceleration and deceleration. Well, I can do something really simple with this, right? I can just call the movement component dot handle acceleration and the movement component dot handle deceleration. Now they're going to need parameters passed through, so in this instance, because the player ship is a character body, I can just pass through self. Just like so. And that's it. Done. Handle sorted. I don't even need to call this velocity anymore. So let's hit Control S and save. Let's go to our player ship and make sure that the movement component up here is now set to something. So it has an acceleration speed of 2, deceleration of 1, and a max speed of 100. I'll give that a try. So I can turn and I can move, and it functions pretty much the exact same way as it did before. Only difference is now we are using a resource to actually handle all of our movement. So why is this important? Well, as I said before, there is a lot more overhead with nodes compared to resources. Now, if you want even less overhead, you can go straight up to objects, just creating raw objects, but then you have to do some memory management, and well, there's a reason why we use GDScript or C#, right? We are afraid of memory management, and memory management is not a fun thing to do. So we will stay away from that for now. But that is a really self-explanatory way of handling resources, or handling code like this through resources, because it means all we have to do here is just create it with a variable. So let's go one more, right? Let's go and create one more. Let's go into our components, create a new script. What else is being handled with, or what other type of movement are we handling? Well, rotation is another one that we're handling. So let's go and do another resource here, and let's call it the rotation component. Rotation component, there we go. Make sure I can spell that. Create a new rotation component. Let's go up here, give it a class underscore name of rotation component. There we go. Sometimes I talk faster than I code, or sometimes I code faster than I talk, and my brain just kind of ceases functionality. So what are we going to need here? Well, let's go back to our player ship. Let's rip out the rotation speed, because we know we're going to need that. So rotation component, let's replace this export var there. Let's go back down into the player ship, and there you go. There's our apply rotation here. So let's rip out that function and rip out the process, or rip it out of the process here. So that's no longer a thing. Let's go and paste that into here and come to a fun realization. So one, we are of course going to need a parameter for this, right? We're going to want to know what we are kind of turning. So let's go and do that. We're going to want to get access to that entity as a parameter again. And we're also going to want to get access to a rotation underscore direction, which is just going to be a floating variable. Because if we want this to be able to be used on everything, it needs to be delinked from input, right? We need to make sure it's not using the input keys to actually apply its rotation, which means this direction here is useless. That means we just need to go rotation plus equals the rotation direction, and of course we need to do entity dot rotation, there we go. That's it. That should work. That should work completely fine. So let's go and go to our player ship. Let's do the exact same thing here. Let's go at export var rotation underscore component. Set that equal to a rotation component and set that equal to null. Let's hit Control S and save. And let's just go into the process. Let's go rotation component dot apply rotation. It's going to need its self pass through again. And then for the rotation direction, I can just go and grab the input dot get underscore axis, not action strength, axis. That I could pass through left and right as the positive and negative actions. And what should happen here is if I go to the player ship, go to rotation component, new rotation component, I'm going to lower this rotation speed down to 0.01. I'm going to hit play, and we're going to see that we can still rotate and everything's working perfectly fine, right? No real change, but a solid refactor that we can use more in the future. And of course, we have knocked down this script quite a bit. There's a lot less in this actual script going on now, which is really good. The player doesn't need to know how it's rotating or what's controlling that. It just needs to know that it should be doing that. So, with that in mind, let's go to the asteroid, and this is where I want to start applying inheritance rather than composition, right? Well, actually both at the same time, realistically speaking. So if these two things are going to be using a lot of similar functionality, one of the things that I can do here is I can create a new script and inherit from that instead of just passing through character body. So what I can do here is I can go down to my scenes folder, into my entity folder, I can right click, create a new script, and this is going to just be called base entity. And this will inherit from character body to D. I'm going to hit create, and we're going to kind of talk through this a little bit. So one big deal with inheritance, and I avoid inheritance until absolutely necessary or until I feel like I know where a good use for it is. If you just create one script and you start inheriting from it over and over and over again, you will eventually end up running into a lot of either clashing code or kind of pigeonholing yourself a little bit into certain things. So when you basically just don't overuse inheritance. It's why you will hear people say that they prefer composition over inheritance, or composition is quote unquote better, when truthfully you should be using both sparingly. You should use both in certain places at certain times. So let's create a class name for this called base entity, and I'll show you what I mean. So the way I look at inheritance is what something is, so what is, and what it has, right? So what is my player ship and my asteroid? Well, they are both entities. They are both base entities. What do both of them have? Well, they both have a movement underscore component because they both need to move. Let's set that equal to null. And they both have a export var rotation underscore component because they both need to rotate somehow, right? Set that equal to null. But, and here's the big difference, what if my player could shoot? What if my player had guns, right? What if he could shoot laser beams and destroy the asteroid? Well, I wouldn't add that here because, realistically speaking, the asteroid shouldn't also be able to shoot, right? So I wouldn't need to do that. Instead, all I've got to do is apply these two things. Now hit Control S and save. And here is where the really cool thing begins. I go to the player ship. Instead of extends character body, I can do extends base entity. And there you go. Now it's going to have some errors. It's going to say error at 4 and 9, so, or 4 to 9. So right here, line 4, the member movement component already exists in parent class base entity. That's because these are already created in the base entity, so I can delete these. And if I do that, as you can see, there is still no errors, and yet we're still calling the movement component. Now, why is that? Well, if I go to the player ship, and I click on it, as you can see, even though the script is saved, we still have access to these. And as you can see at the top here, right here, it's saying that these are being housed inside of the base entity class, not player ship class. That is because that's where these come from. That's what it's inheriting from. If I scroll all the way down, you can see that's kind of how this works with nodes in general, right? This is how they inherit. Starts with a node, canvas item, node 2D, collision object. All of these inherit from something somewhere down the line. All of them come from an object. And eventually you end up with a character body 2D, or in this case, we went one step further and a base entity. So if I wanted to add other player ships that does do something unique, I can now extend from player ship by using, creating a new class like player ship 2 or my player ship, and then use extends player ship, and it'll have access to all the same functionality as the player ship, but be player specific. So if I wanted to add a new, we'll just do this in a comment, a new export var here for weapons underscore component, and I made one that was, called a weapons component. I would set that equal to null, so I could then, go and modify it in the inspector. And then if I wanted to add more weapons or do something else, I would just inherit from player ship and just go from there. And now, another big benefit here is that's composition and inheritance, right? We are composing our scripts correctly whilst also applying some inheritance, so we have to do less work in the future. So what does that mean? Well, that means I can come back to the asteroid here. I know for a fact that this is a base entity, which means all of this stuff can go. It also means, say, velocity can go. Handle acceleration can go. Apply rotation can also go. So I'm going to hit Control S and save. And as you can see here, handle acceleration, angry, apply rotation, angry. So let's do this. Let's go in apply movement. Let's just see if we can call the movement component and go movement component dot handle acceleration, pass through self. Click on the asteroid, make sure it has a movement component applied, give it the same acceleration, speed, and stuff as the player, hit Control S and save, and the ready function is going to be mad. Now, here is a small place that we've or small issue that we've run into. As of right now, if I go to my rotation component, it needs to have a rotation direction pass through, right? And it's going to constantly apply that rotation, which is what the plus equal stands for. We don't want the asteroid to be kind of spinning out of control too much, right? We want it to kind of randomize its rotation and pick a direction. So I'm actually going to add an extension or a helper function to the rotation component here, which is just going to be called set underscore rotation. And all this is going to take in is an entity. And we could pass through another direction if we really want to, but we will just pass through an entity and we will do a void return and we will just go entity dot rotation is equal to, let's just do a rand f range between 0 and tau. Tau, by the way, is memory serves it is pi doubled, so it's double pi, hence tau. So that basically gives us a random range between 0 and 360. And that's it, right? I can go to the asteroid under the ready function here. I can go to the rotation component dot set rotation pass through self, and we are more or less just done. Let's hit play and see what happens. Well, player can still move, and everything crashed. Why is that? Because it's non-existent. What did I forget? If you guessed that I forgot to actually add a rotation component, you'd be correct. Got to keep you on your toes. That's definitely not me forgetting. I'm definitely not forgetting to just do these things, I swear. Let's try that again. Let's hit play and let it run. And see that the asteroids are now functioning how they used to, where they rotate and move in a certain direction or any direction. Right now I would need to tweak how they are choosing the direction and basically make them target the center of the screen and spawn maybe outside of the screen, but that's not really what we're kind of going for here. It is, however, done. That's it. Like that's the simplicity of using both composition and inheritance to slowly build out your projects, right? And you can do so much more with this. It doesn't need to just apply to base entity or, you know, our ship and asteroid. If you're using or creating like a FPS game, you could literally do this for weapons. You could do a base weapon thing which contained like a base weapon which has, I don't know, let's just say an ammo count sprite for it, and that's it. And then you extend from that and you're like, okay, well now I want an assault rifle type weapon class, so you make a class name for the assault rifle, and then you just kind of extend as you go and then slowly compose it as you go. Now, I said go careful with go careful specifically with inheritance, because sometimes you can pigeonhole yourself. Plan out a little bit as you go. Don't just start inheriting randomly. But yeah, for now, that's all I have. Thank you for watching. I hope you're having a great day and a great game dev journey. I hope this has been informative, and I will see you in the next video.